All right, so from underneath your toolbox, there are a series of data controls. And the data control that I want to focus on is the data grid view. So if I drag the data grid view, I'm going to put it into the center of the toolbox or the tool strip container. And then I get this little dialog that comes up, and I want to choose dock to parent container is the option I want to select. And then you'll see that we have a bunch of options with this tool or with this data grid view. It says choose a data source, edit columns, add columns, enable adding, editing, deleting, all this stuff. I'm going to uncheck all three of those options, and I'm not going to choose anything else. What this allows you to do is to do what's called rapid application development. Typically, it's used in scenarios where you are prototyping concepts and you're trying to get something together quickly, or you're just trying to build a small unit of work application that may be needed for a particular case. So rapid app development is great because it basically just uses tools out of your toolbox. You would, instead of doing a connection object and a SQL utility and all of those things, you would simply grab a SQL data connection out of the toolbox and drag it onto the form. It'll give you the same prompts. Give me the server name, the connection, the database, the username, and password. It'll set it all up. You select that data source from this menu, and it'll just bind to it, and it does all the magic for you. Sounds nice. The catch is that you are now tightly connected to that SQL data connector that's configured for that database. And if for whatever reason you need to change your application in any way, it is not flexible. It's not designed to be flexible, it's designed to be fast. Last statement, if you do that for your project, I will not give you any credit for the SQL piece of the project. Because I'm expecting to see that you can build enterprise applications. That's the objective of this course. The techniques and approaches I'm showing you are to be used for building enterprise level applications. But if you're in a work scenario, I do want to make you aware of that because it does make things go very quickly. So since we're not using those, what we're going to do is we're going to manually bind our list of users to this grid. So to do that, I'm going to wire into the form load. So I double clicked on the toolbar, or the menu bar at the top, gives me the form load event. I'm going to then create my SQL user utility object. Then I'm going to pass in my connection string. I'm going to call it SQL user connection. And actually, instead of putting it in there, I'm going to create a private method that is load users. So I'll probably end up calling this code multiple times throughout the app. So from here, we'll do a list of user, bring in our using statement, get all users, and then I did not rename our data grid view, so it should be data grid view 1 dot data source equals users. I'll go ahead and add my SQL user connection string to my app config. So connection strings, add the name, SQL user. The provider is system.data.SQL client for what it's worth. And then the connection string is server equals local / SQL Express, semicolon, the database is 15ss-cp/midterm. And it is a trusted connection. Or you can go to connectionstrings.com. Honestly, I'll be impressed if that works. It's always one of those things you think you know it, but then you do it and you don't know it. We'll see what happens. All right, load users. So if we start and run, we have an exception. Incorrect syntax near the keyword user. Oh. User is a keyword in SQL, so I need to put that in square brackets. And there is our users table.
You didn't know that was a keyword. That'd take you a lifetime to figure out.
That would take you a lifetime to figure out. And it has taken me a lifetime to figure out. So, user is a keyword. If you ever end up with an error like that where it says incorrect syntax, let me go back and so you can see it. So the error that I received is incorrect syntax near the keyword user. If you ever end up with a syntax error on a field name or a table, the first thing you should always do, without hesitation, is put square brackets around it. That is the escape sequence to basically tell SQL that this is not a command. It is not a variable, but it's a context. You're talking about a user, you're talking about a table, you're talking about a field. So whenever you run into an issue where it says that your table doesn't have the correct syntax, just put a square bracket around it. That tells SQL that is a table. All right. So let's go ahead and put some data in this table to make sure that it works. I don't want data sources. Server Explorer, right click on the table, open or show table data. That'll bring up a view of the table. Our ID is an identity field, so we don't have to populate it. So I'll just type in my name. Let's see, I'm going to create this on 3/3/2015, and it's last modified 3/3/2015. All right, so if we run again, it's going to balk at me because the connection is open. Index out of range exception, email. Oh, because it's not called email. It's called the email address. So the index out of range exception. Gosh, it's a good thing I'm doing this. So the exception is being thrown as an index out of range exception. And all it says is email. Where do you think I should go look?
In the reader?
In the reader, okay. So here's my reader. So
yeah, the map from SQL Reader.
Map from SQL Reader. All right. So inside of here, where's the issue?
Email equals. Oh, you should in the quotes email address.
Correct. So it's picking up this string of email and it's looking for a column or a field name of email. Well, in the database, it's not called email; it's called email address. So I typed it wrong. My property is called email, which is fine, but the field name is actually email address. So we'll change that and rerun. And there is my row from the database. So remember that this just isn't a straight database dump. What's happening is we're querying the database, we're getting the data out, we're putting it into a user object, which is stored in a list, and that list is actually being bound to this grid. So the grid is actually showing us the user objects from the list of users. So we're 2 or 3 layers away from the database itself. So the next thing I'd like to do is implement the add button. So we'll come back to the form, double click add, and then in here we're going to say add form or add user, which is our form. Add user form equals new add user form dot show dialog. Actually, before we do that, we're going to do add user form plus, oh, we don't have the event yet. The event will be called user added. It's not going to give us the helper for that either. So we're going to go into the add user. This is our form. We're going to add a public event called user added. This will be event handler user added event args. We're going to need to add that class. So under my form project, I'm going to right click add. I'm going to create a new folder called models. And then under that, I'm going to right click and add a class called user added event args. I'll make it public. It will inherit event args. And then it'll have a constructor which will take the user object. It'll have a have a property of user, and then I'll simply say user equals new user. Alright. Add my using statement since I put it under a new folder, created a new namespace. So that's our event. Flip back here. I can now come back to my event handler piece, create my event handler for when the user is added. So we'll get back to that in a minute. So I've kind of got myself prepped. So now I'm going to jump back to my add user form and put that together. So inside of here, toolbox, I'm going to need first name, last name, email, username, password. Equally distribute to the left. First name, oops, sorry about that. First name, last name, email, username, password. We'll add a text box for each. I'll just go fast for time. Now the password we can actually set up, where is it at? You can set use system password char to true, and then I think that's it. That'll enable that to be a password field. You'll get the little dots. And we'll add a button here for submit. We'll add a second button to cancel. BTN cancel and BTN submit. All right. So we'll do some validation. We'll do message box.show. First name required. Last name, email, username, password. Okay, so that'll be our validation. And then we will pack into a user object and then raise the event. So add our using statement, new user equals new user object. So it'll be email equals txt email.text. First name equals txtfn.text. Last name equals txtln.text. Username equals txtuser.text. Password equals txtpass.text. And then we'll say if user added does not equal null, then we'll call user added. This comma new user added event args, which will take in our new user. Okay. So you can get rid of that. I think that's cancel will just be this.close. Close form, no questions asked. So let's do message box.show. Yay, we have a user. e.user.firstname plus e.user.last name. And we'll build and run. So there's our form. We'll hit add. There's our new user. And there's our password field working correctly. We'll hit submit. So we now have a form allowing us to add a user. We have that user going from our add user form into our main form. We're handling that event. So now the next step would be to take that user and put him back in the database and refresh our view.